everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tombstone Tourist. This is part 2 of my visit to the Forest Lawn Memory Gardens here in Goodlettsville, Tennessee. In my last video, I concentrated on the country music stars who are buried in Music Row. In this video, I'm going to be visiting the graves of some of the other stars who are resting throughout this rather large cemetery. Music Row is a small section in the median between the entrance and exit roads here at Forest Lawn, and in my last video, we visited the graves of Lefty Frizzell, Cowboy Copus, Hawkshaw Hawkins, and Ramsey Hughes, just to name a few. Leaving Music Row, I only had to walk across the road to find the grave of popular banjo and dobro player who was a longtime member of Roy Acuff's Smoky Mountain Boys. Here, we find the grave of Beecher Ray Kirby, better known to fans of the Grand Ole Opry as Bashful Brother Oswald. Beecher Ray Kirby was born on December 26, 1911 in the Great Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee. As a youngster, he learned to play the guitar and banjo by playing at local square dances. And during the Great Depression, he took up a new instrument, the dobro, which became his signature instrument. In 1934, he began performing under the name Pete Kirby and joined Roy Acuff's band, the Crazy Tennesseans. While performing with the Crazy Tennesseans, Roy began introducing him as Bashful Brother Oswald. Pete embraced the character and began wearing a floppy hat, overalls, and developed a loud, braying laugh. And from then on, Pete Kirby would forever be known as Bashful Brother Oswald. In 1939, Roy took his band to Nashville, where he renamed them the Smoky Mountain Boys and began appearing on the Grand Ole Opry. Over the years, band members came and went, but Bashful Brother Oswald remained with Roy and the Smoky Mountain Boys until Roy's death in 1992. After Roy's death, Oz joins fellow Smoky Mountain boy Charlie Collins and continued to perform at the Opryland Amusement Park and on the Grand Ole Opry. The two stayed together until Bashful Brother Oswald passed away at the age of 90 on October 17, 2002. On a personal note, Roy Acuff and the Smoky Mountain Boys was probably my favorite act on the Grand Ole Opry, and I always loved it when Oz was featured on Roy's signature song, the Wabash Cannonball, and when he would play my favorite, the dobro chimes. Rest well, Oz. You were one of a kind. Just a short walk across the road from the grave of Bashful Brother Oswald is the Garden of the Last Supper. Here, we find the grave of Johnny Sullivan, who is better known to fans of the Grand Ole Opry as Lonzo, of the music and comedy duo Lonzo and Oscar. Johnny Sullivan was actually the second person to play Lonzo in the comedy team. The first was a man named Lloyd George, who left the act in 1950. It was then that Johnny joined his brother Roland Oscar Sullivan, and the pair went on to become one of the most popular comedy acts on the Grand Ole Opry. In 1948, Lloyd George and Roland Sullivan recorded a novelty song called I'm My Own Grandpa. When Johnny joined the act in 1950, it became the act's signature song. and was one of the most popular songs in country music. Johnny Sullivan portrayed Lonzo in the act from 1950 until his death in 1967. After Johnny's death, Rollin continued to act with David Hooten, who was the third and final Lonzo. In 1985, Lonzo and Oscar made their final appearance on the Grand Ole Opry, and the act was retired. After the act was retired, Rollin continued to appear as Oscar, performing occasionally on the Grand Ole Opry, where he would always sing, "I'm on Grandpa." Rollin Oscar Sullivan died at the age of 93 on September 7, 2012, and is resting just a short distance from Lonzo here in the Garden of the Last Supper. During my visit, there was a service taking place near Oscar's grave, and rather than intrude, I have inserted a couple of photos from my earlier visit. During that visit, Oscar was still alive, and that's the reason there was no date of death on his marker. Also resting here in the Garden of the Last Supper, and just a short walk from the graves of Lonzo and Oscar, is the final resting place of country music star Jack Anglin. Jack Anglin was born on May 13, 1916 in Franklin, Tennessee. As a teenager, he was taught to play guitar by his father and soon began appearing on local radio stations and at community functions. He later joined his brothers Van and Jim and began performing as the Anglin Brothers. After the brothers disbanded in 1939, Jack moved to Nashville, where he met his wife Louise, who was the sister of Johnny Wright, who just happened to be married to country music star Kitty Wells. Soon after, Jack joined Johnny Wright and began performing as the popular country music duo known as Johnny and Jack. They became members of the Grand Ole Opry with such hits as Poison Love, Crying Heart Blues, and their biggest hit, Ashes of Love. On March 8, 1963, Jack had attended the memorial services for Cowboy Copas, Ramsey Hughes, and Hawkshaw Hawkins, who along with Patsy Cline were killed in a plane crash a few days earlier. He was running late to attend Patsy Cline's memorial service, and as he sped down the highway near Madison, Tennessee, he lost control of his car, ran off the road, and struck a tree. He was killed instantly. Jack Anglin was 46 years old. Next, I moved back across the road to the Garden of Meditation. While walking around this section, looking for the grave of another person, I happened upon the final resting place of Herman Harper. Herman Harper was born on December 31st, 1938 in Sumner County, Tennessee. He was a pioneering gospel singer known for his deep bass voice. During the late 1950s and 1960s, he was a bass singer for the Oak Ridge Quartet, which later became the Oak Ridge Boys. Through his association with the Oak Ridge Quartet, Herman advanced the popularity of gospel music on television and on the Grand Ole Opry. In 1985, he founded Harper & Associates, which became the leading talent agency specializing in promoting gospel music, and he was the founder of the Gospel Music Trust Fund. Herman was also a regular weekly performer on the Grand Ole Opry as a member of the Opry's backup singing group, the Carol E. Singers. Herman Harper died at the age of 54 on December 17, 1993. 4 years after his death, he was inducted into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame. The GPS coordinates for the grave that I was actually looking for when I found the grave of Herman Harper were quite a bit off. But after about 20 minutes of walking around the section, I eventually found the grave of Joe Earl Stewart. Joe Earl Stewart was a native of Knoxville, Tennessee, where he played the guitar, fiddle, and mandolin on local radio stations. This would lead him to join Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs' Foggy Mountain Boys. After a few years, he eventually left the Foggy Mountain Boys and joined Bill Monroe and his Bluegrass Boys. It was during his time with Bill Monroe that he began his long association with the Grand Ole Opry. Joe Earl was a talented bluegrass musician and at one time or another played every bluegrass instrument. Because of this, he was a popular session musician in Nashville and was a member of the Grand Ole Opry staff band. He was also known for his sense of humor, a trait that those associated with him said he always had a smile and could always make those around him smile. It was impossible to be in a bad mood when Joe Earl was around. Joe Earl Stewart died at the age of 59 on September 13, 1987. His last request was for Bill Monroe to sing all 25 verses of John Henry at his funeral. The father of bluegrass gladly fulfilled his request. One of the graves that I really wanted to visit here at Forest Lawn is in a large section at the far east side of the cemetery. I'd been here a few years back and tried to find it, but was unsuccessful. This time, however, his Find a Grave Memorial had accurate GPS coordinates, and I was able to visit the final resting place of Mack Magahey. Mack Magahey was a native of South Carolina and was born on August 1st, 1929. As a teenager, he developed a love for the fiddle and became quite popular, appearing on local radio stations and at area events. In 1955, Mack joined Don Reno and Red Smiley's Tennessee Cut-Ups, performing on local TV and radio stations throughout the Roanoke and Shenandoah valleys of Virginia. Mack moved to Nashville in 1964 and joined Porter Wagner's band, the Wagon Masters. It was with Porter that Mack gained national attention, appearing on tour and on the weekly Porter Wagner TV show. His energy and stage presence made him the most popular fiddle player in the country. He was dubbed the Dancin Fiddle Player by Porter, who called him a ball of fire and a first-class showman. In the 1970s, Mack left the Wagon Masters and became a regular performer at the old Opryland Amusement Park, often appearing with another former Wagon Master, banjo player Buck Trent. When Opryland closed, Mack was one of Nashville's most popular session musicians, performing on records by country music stars Travis Trent, Loretta Lynn, Dolly Parton, and Patty Loveless, just to name a few. Mack Magahey died of natural causes at the age of 74 on August 15, 2003. Members of the Grand Ole Opry served as honorary pallbearers as he was laid to rest here in Forest Lawn. Across the road from the grave of Mack Magahey is the Garden of Gethsemane. Just a few rows in from the road, we find the grave of one of Nashville's best steel guitar players, the grave of little Roy Wiggins. Born Ivan Leroy Wiggins in Nashville, Tennessee on June the 27th, 1926, he bought his first guitar from a traveling salesman. By the time he was 15, he was playing professionally with the Arkansas Cotton Pickers. Being small in stature, people began calling him Little Roy instead of Leroy. The name stuck, and in 1943, he joined Pee Wee King's Golden West Cowboys, which also included an up-and-coming musician named Eddie Arnold. A short time later, Eddie Arnold left the Golden West Cowboys and struck out on his own. The first person he hired was Little Roy Wiggins, who had become a first-rate steel guitar player, developing a signature ting-a-ling sound that helped make Arnold one of the country's most popular entertainers. Success, however, led to some conflict between Eddie and Little Roy, and they eventually went their separate ways. Little Roy began concentrating on making instrumental records and working as a session musician for a number of Nashville studios. In 1968, Little Roy opened a music store in downtown Nashville near the Ryman Auditorium, while continuing to perform on the Opry's, backing up such stars as Ernie Ashworth, the Willis Brothers, and George Morgan. When the Opry moved from the Ryman to the new Opry House at Opryland in 1974, Little Roy closed his music store and moved to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, where he performed at local tourist attractions and backing up local talent on a number of the area's popular music shows. He lived the rest of his life in the Pigeon Forge area and was inducted into the Steel Guitar Hall of Fame in 1995. Little Roy Wiggins died from the complications of diabetes on August 3, 1999. He was 73 years old. Well, this has turned into a pretty long video, so I'm going to finish my visit to Forest Lawn Memorial Gardens in my next video. If you have a favorite Grand Ole Opry memory or a favorite memory of any of the stars that I visited today, be sure to leave me a comment. And if you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please consider ringing that bell and subscribing. So, until next time, please remember, life is a wonderful journey. Be sure to take time and enjoy it, and I'll see you down the road. So long, everyone.